Okay, well, welcome everyone. We are about a minute before 6 o'clock, but lots of you already joining us. We are also on the Facebook Live. Welcome to everyone that is following us here, and a few more will probably show up in a little bit. We hope so. And we are also, as I said, on Facebook Live, and of course, the lecture series is also recorded and always archived at the Fresno State PBBI YouTube channel. We are glad that all of you are here. Welcome to another PBBI-FLAD Spring Lecture Series for 2021. Very different than we were doing a little over a year ago, as we were doing these live at Fresno State, and that is always a lot more fun, seeing everyone and doing what Portuguese Americans do a lot, which is touching and hugging and everything else, all those things that we aren't doing right now in this particular time in history. And so we hope to be back soon. We don't know if it's going to be next semester, but as far as the live presentations, or for sure, spring of 2022, but we hope it is in the fall of 2021. We have an amalgam of presentations throughout just about one every single week between now and May 15th. So please check it out. The easiest way is to go to the Fresno State Alumni Association website, and their calendar of events. They are nice enough to promote the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute events. Again, welcome everyone. Those of you following us on Facebook as well. Those of you following us here on the Zoom webinar, please remember that you can use chat anytime that you would like to have a question posed to our guest. And I hope that you do, because some of you are experts in the field. I am not. So the questions will obviously be much more pertinent if they come from folks who understand the topic better than I do. So our topic today is something that we do once every single semester, which is Portuguese Americans in Valley Agriculture. We do a subtitle called From Tradition to Innovation. Portuguese Americans have been involved in some way of agriculture since the 1860s in the Valley, as we can best look at. We had Portuguese Americans involved in agriculture in the Valley, certainly in Tulare County in the 1870s and 1880s. And we have been an important part of the dairy and the farming industries throughout the Valley, throughout the state, and other parts of the Western United States as well. We're very pleased to have our guest today, and for what promises to be a fascinating conversation. I'm going to learn a lot, because the last time I was in the dairy barn, I was 17 years old. I was telling my students today, as I encouraged them to be here and ask questions, especially those going into the field of agriculture. I milked cows between the ages of 12. That would have been child labor at that time, but or that time we didn't worry about that. But anyway, I started milking cows with my dad at the age of 12 and worked with him until I was 17 years old. And so I know the milk barn, the old milk barn of about 45 years ago very well. Things are certainly much different. We're very glad to have Tom Barcellos here. Tom is a Portuguese American, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I remember from the fascinating oral history that I did with his parents, whom I like dearly, his father, I believe, came from Portugal, but his mom was already born here, I believe, in Southern California, in the Artesia area, and they have roots, of course, in the island of Terceira. Tom owns a farming and dairy operation that he'll talk a little bit about more than I can. You saw the website, Barcellos Farms. Check it out. It's fascinating. I'd love to see farmers and folks who traditionally don't use these technologies as much do that. So welcome, Tom. We're happy to have you here. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Well, Denise, thank you very much. It's an honor, first of all, and a pleasure to be here. I'd like to first take this opportunity to point out I'm fully aware that the clock behind me does not have the correct time. Somebody would point it out before the end of the day, so I'll just put it out there. It probably won't have the correct time until the world is back to normal.
Ah, okay. So, that may be hopefully soon. Hopefully very soon.
Hopefully soon. Anyway, yes, my father's from Treseda. Sadly, he passed away last November 1st at the age of 95 after a very, very brief illness. Um, and my mother is 89 and doing well. She lives next door to me here on the dairy, still in the house that she's lived in her entire life, her entire married life of over 71 years. So I get a chance to see her every morning when I'm making my rounds. And this is the house that I live in. Is still contains the entirety of my grandparents' home. Uh,
Wow.
so yeah, we're very much grounded in family history here.
Indeed, you are, and I had the opportunity to find that out when I, as I said, when we chatted with your parents for the oral history project, and we have to get to you as soon as we have a different world. Um, Tom, you began obviously very young in working in the farm. The farm has been part of, as you said, your family history for a few generations. So tell us a little bit about that process. Where'd you go to school, and how in the Porterville area? I know the family, of course, is the Porterville area, and how did farming come to you, as you know, and how did you grow into it throughout these times?
Well, number one, I was born on the dairy. That's actually the facility that I have now, and so as we were growing up, my brother Anthony and I would feed cows every other Sunday, and my uncle's boys would feed on those opposite Sundays. And whenever I get home from grammar school, Pleasant View School, which we all graduated from, which I've also been a board member there for over 35 years, I would be able to walk out the back of the house to the dairy and, go to the shop and help or get in the way, or, sometimes both. Um, and I grew up with a passion for the farming equipment in particular, and I enjoyed so much being around the cows. Um, Graduated high school, and my father had contracted valley fever, a very serious case of valley fever, and actually had to leave the dairy business, even though he never moved. But he couldn't be out around the corrals and such. He took up electronics and had a very, very lucrative electronics business for many, many years. I don't think there was a Portuguese family in Tulare County that he didn't fix their TV or put up a satellite back in the days. So
We were one of them. We were one of them.
yeah. So anyway, it was well known, and actually, there was a lot of people that didn't know the connection between my father and I, because I was a farm kid, and he was an electronics guy. But he taught us a work ethic and a passion for knowledge, and not to turn away from the progressions that took place in the industries. Um, they were one of the first, in the dairy business to have a low line milk line. My grandfather, father, and uncle were featured in that in the very early '60s, and so being progressive in the industry and the business came natural. I graduated Menachie High School, 1973. Uh, I met my wife that summer, surprisingly, at the Tulare Festa. So, she grew up on a dairy west of Tulare, so we had a lot of common interests. Graduated from Porterville College in '75, and got married in February of 1976, and that was the same year that I left the dairy area and went into farming. I rented a piece of ground and started farming, and expanded to about 1,200 acres of rented land, and eventually was able to start buying First piece I bought was from my uncle, who had retired. Then when my grandparents passed away in the early '80s, then the family dairy facility came available throughout a variety of circumstances, and it was time to kind of get back to my real roots and get back involved in the dairy business, because it just didn't work out to have people who rented on there. They didn't have the passion and the desire to do the kind of maintenance that it needed. Plus, I was farming enough acreage, I could always grow the feed. And I remember very well my grandfather saying when I was younger that if you have the cows, you need to have the land to feed them. And if you have the land, you can give the feed to the cows and make money both ways. So that's the direction I ended up in. In 1989 is when I got back in the dairy business with a partner, Louis Tristo, who actually his family grew up as a herdsman for my uncle. And we expanded T-Bar Dairy, and eventually we operated another site and grew that well enough that Louis was able to strike out on his own, TriStar Dairy, and I stayed with T-Bar Dairy. And a few years later, I established White Gold Dairy, second facility with my daughter Bridget and her husband Matthew, and my 5 grandkids from them. So anyway, we operate 2 dairies, White Gold Dairy, T-Bar Dairy, and obviously Barcellos Farms, which was what we started with 45 years ago.
In the Barcellos Farms, you've diversified quite a bit. I mean, if we go into your website, you do lots of different products. You just don't farm. I mean, you have other services that you do and you provide. So tell us a little bit about how and why the choice. Why diversify? Why have all those? I mean, you have a lot of stakes in the fire. Let's put it that way. I mean, you've diversified into various areas within the farming world. And what led you to do that, Tom?
Well, number one, when you start out small, you can't afford to buy things. And so as I started farming, if I wanted to have nice equipment, number one, you have to get a return on that investment. So as I was, started out the very first year, I rented a tractor and some equipment from my uncle to get my crop planted, which was all grain. And then I didn't need any equipment until it was time to put in the next crop. But by then I was looking around and I said, man, everybody's running their equipment. I needed to buy a tractor. So I bought a tractor to do my work. And then I was also applying fertilizer for a local chemical company. And I got busy enough that all of a sudden I needed 2. Eventually I was doing custom farming for other people, renting more ground, and quite a few of them were local dairies. And as we were looking at these dairies, I'm saying, well, we've got a lot of manure in these ponds that we need to get cleaned out. And so I bought an excavator to clean out the ponds, and pretty soon we were so busy that we had to get a second one. And then I looked at the excavators. I says, I need a trailer to move them around. So I ended up buying a low bed to move my equipment. Pretty soon we're busy enough that I got other people asking us to do work. So at one point we were running 3 excavators and 3 low beds, and it goes on that way. I ended up with combines. I was harvesting grain out in the lake bottom in Corcoran. We were running 4 combines at one point, and got rid of those 4 and got 3 new ones. And everything is just an expansion of a need, and it's done well. Eventually we quit the combines because the grains went away, but all of a sudden we kept looking, we got to get our feed in. So now we actually run a chopping crew. We run 6 choppers and 20 trucks, right along with the low beds, and the excavators continue to go. As far as cropping goes, we've always double cropped our wheats and grains into corn for silage. And in 2000, we determined that there was some opportunities to make some changes and become more efficient. We were just swamped with trying to get double cropping done. And we looked at an opportunity to do some conservation tillage. So I got to working with Jeff Mitchell at UC Davis, and through ag extension, and we put in 320 acres of strip till corn, or actually no till corn, in 2000. And in 2001, I ended up doing, rather than using someone else's planter, I bought my own, and we planted 3,000 acres of no-till corn between ours and what we did for hire. From that point on, other people started buying, and there was just this huge shift to no-till and strip-till corn. The reason that was able to come about was because of the new genetics in the corn seed, which we then could spray Roundup over the top and do weed control. And currently, we do all strip till or no till on our double cropping, and we have most of our neighbors do the same. We do a little custom farming, still conventional, for some other growers that have a different type of soil, that they just still old school and they want to stay with it, and we're fine with that. They're still raising good crops. I mean, it's just paid dividends by making those kinds of changes. Did a study in the middle of one with for dust control. Did it with a young man from UC Davis. He was doing a master's thesis on dust control in conventional versus no-till cropping. And we ended up developing some numbers where we had a 96% dust reduction by doing a strip till versus conventional tillage. While it takes some expertise and cost to make those changes to go from conventional to strip till and conservation style tillage, it pays dividends. You get fuel savings, emissions obviously go down, labor savings, and it works in most all soil types. But you have to have enough equipment. Your management has to be a little sharper. It's not as forgiving, but at the same time, you're not running so much equipment that you don't have time to go out and manage the project. So my son-in-law, Matt, has done a great job coming in and handling that. Wasn't real keen on it in the beginning, but you know what? When you see results, you kind of go with it. With his involvement, we've also even diversified our cropping. You know, we now have some pistachios. We have some new lemons and tangos that were planted 3 years ago. And it's just to diversify the cash flow streams from different sources. So all of our eggs aren't in one basket. And currently, I'm doing a project with UC Davis. We actually have some winter safflower. And to anybody that is familiar with safflower, well, that usually gets planted, you know, in April or May, and gets harvested, and it gets real thorny and everything else. Well, we planted it at the end of November, and we're going to chop it off for silage, probably mid-March or by the 1st of April, just as it's flowering. And we anticipate it's going to be about 7 foot tall.
Wow.
Which is twice as tall as it normally is. But due to the cooler weather, it will not be flowering and maturing out. So it's an interesting process. I've already had tons of people drive by and look at it. And currently it's about 2.5 foot tall. And it's really kind of exciting. And I love doing this because we all learn from it. And it just opens up new opportunities. In particular, it's not going to use as much water. We're looking at its ability to draw deep nutrients from below the normal root zones of wheat and corn that we end up fertilizing with dairy water. And we want to make sure that we utilize all of the available nutrients so they don't end up percolating into the underground.
Wow.
And
Fascinating.
I'll talk for a second.
Fascinating. No, please do. Fascinating. What made you, I mean, you said it was a project and you were working with UC Davis on that. What what drives you to this innovation? Because I mean, some people, if you're making if you're doing okay financially, and obviously you are in many ways, but they stay with what they know. It's kind of the fear of the unknown sometimes, but that seems to be kind of a driving force for you.
I get excited about things. And actually, for the many years, so 45 years I've been farming, and for probably 43 of those years, I've always had seed trial plots in my silages. And it just puts you in connection with different growers, with different agronomists, with different seed companies, with extension service when they come out and want to look at these different things. So basically, my entire farming career, I've worked with extension, and whether it was a UC system or extension, when they're working together to try and improve on what we're doing, because if you just stay with what you got, pretty soon it gets stagnant and you get bored. I get excited when there's a new idea. And so we had many, many years of seed population trials, of variety trials. We almost had a field day here every year for many, many years. And then, of course, then everybody starts cutting costs, so they start cutting out the field days. But we continued to do the trials with the varieties to see how they would come out. It was probably doing those trials is where I got connected with the UC system, as far as Jeff Mitchell in going into the conservation tillage, with Neil Sheenstra on some of the fertilizer and irrigation things. We've done deep soil testing on a dairy plot. There was 10 different dairies from the Southern California all the way to Northern California, and I was one here in the middle, where we really managed our water, did our measurements, looked at what our nutrient applications were, what the uptakes were in the plant physiology, and how far it came out of the soil. We dug down 10 feet to see how far the roots went. It was pretty extensive. It was with Stu Pettigrew from Davis at the time, and that was back in '96. And just one thing leads to another. So I'm not always out in search of projects to do. A lot of times I get phone calls and say, hey, would you be interested? I said, heck yeah, I'm interested. Even specifically as a Safflower now, UC Davis did a 1 acre test last year, and that's why they wanted to expand it a little bit and asked if I'd be interested in doing a couple acres. I said, yeah, but let's put a 0 behind it. So we actually have a 20 acre plot instead of just 1 or 2. And we're treating them a little bit differently, because I actually want to see, we're going to use fresh water on about 12 to 13 acres of that. And we're going to use 2 different rates of blended lagoon water on the other piece. So we're actually going to have a little variety of testing going on in the main test. So it's just more opportunity to look at it. It accelerates the knowledge so that we know what we need to try again next year. Because I'm not looking at this as being this is a one-shot deal. Whatever we learn from this, we're going to try to do better next year. And with the new groundwater regulations in Sigma, and with what's coming there, this safflower as a low-use crop may benefit us tremendously. So we're looking at the big picture, because I also sit on an irrigation district board, and we know that we've got to change the way we irrigate and what water we're going to have available in the future. So next in the works, we're going to do some underground drip on some corn with Gar Bennett, and we're really excited about that. And we are actually going to be using some dairy lagoon water in that underground drip system. So we'll see how that pans out.
So how important to you, and we were already getting some questions, and I thank all of you. So please keep the questions coming, and we will, of course, ask Tom. How important has this partnership that you've done with UC Davis, and how important you see, education, and I'm of course going to pull a little bit for Fresno State as well. How important do you see this partnership, and how these ag schools, whether it be at UC Davis, at Cal Poly, at Fresno State, how important are these ag schools for the future of farming? How do you see them partnering up, like with you, for example, and other farmers in these experiments that will benefit the farming, will benefit the community, will benefit the state, and of course, that's what education is all about. What's your take on that, Tom?
Well, I think the partnership with the schools and agriculture in itself, I think that's huge. That is a primary reason why even get involved. I always had, from the 80s on, I would have Fresno State and Cal Poly would bring one of their ag teams out, usually their ag mechanics group or whatever. They would come to the farm, look at our combines with yield monitors in them, with global positioning, so we could make yield maps. They wanted to see things in real time, and then from here they would go on to Porterville, to Gillespie Ag, who was running variable rate equipment, and EC Veris to get soil conductivity. So the schools would bring the students out, and they would see real time and hands-on, where they would start asking questions, and they would really get more excited about it than they would out of a textbook or from watching film.
Sure.
And I get tremendous value. I get tremendous pleasure out of that as well. And we're available all the time. We always have the grammar school kids come out to the dairy. We always bring the third grade class every year. They get to see the cows getting milked. They can go up and pet a cow, because we have a certain group that the kids can be around, and they get involved. Of course, they get milk and cookies afterwards, which really kind of a highlight for them. But being involved with the universities and with UC, it gives us the first step to making the connections of what direction we need to go. And it also brings their ability to communicate with their students what it's really like. I've spoken many times at Fresno State and many times at UC Davis as well to their classes. And it's really exciting, because, typically you have an hour class, and this is a little bit different here now. It's always nice to have all the faces out there, and you can read the crowd, you see the expressions, you get a feeling, because typically I would be able to do a 15-minute presentation and have 45 minutes of Q&A, which to me I found to be most valuable. And you need to engage people to get them excited about it.
We have a couple of questions I'd like to pose to you from the audience, and from those that are here on Zoom webinar, and those of you on the social media platforms. You can do that as well. It's not as easy for me to check those questions, but I promise I'll check them when Tom is answering. I want to pay attention to what he's saying, so I'm trying to do two things at once. And at my age, that's not the easiest thing in the world anymore. But Tom, a little bit about one of the questions, actually someone watching in Maryland tonight, and it talks a little bit about what are some of the biggest challenges? And I think that you could go on for an hour probably. What are some of the biggest challenges for Valley farmers? But around basically water, energy costs, invasive pests, regulations, changing consumer tastes, etc. Please describe. and any new crops on the horizon to cater to ethnic tastes. And there's in parentheses, who thought that chickpeas would be so big now. What let's start, let's get a little bit political. I know you understand ag policy. Besides, of course you wouldn't be successful if you didn't, but you understand all the ag policies and everything else. And so let's talk a little bit about what are indeed some of these challenges that you foresee now and in the near future for an industry that you've been involved in for over four decades now. And let's start with farming, and maybe we can touch upon the dairy separate as well.
Well, I would say for me and for the ag community in California, the biggest challenges we face is regulation. And I would start with calling ourselves the actual stepchild of the chemical world. Um, California's regulations are so strict and rigid, and the fact that we have over 400 crops that are grown in California, that a lot of the chemical companies don't spend the extra money to get a certain herbicide or a pesticide labeled specifically for California, because it takes a heck of a lot more than it does to do it on a federal level. So you have the federal EPA, they go through, do their testing and whatnot. So there's many more chemicals that are available throughout the country at a lesser cost than is available to California. We have a lot of different crops that are adjacent to one another, and so you have to have different buffer zones. So regulations there are a challenge, and we probably have more environmental concerns in California. And I would just say that as a farmer, we make our money with our land and our crops, and the last thing we want to do is damage either. And so we're the true environmentalists here, and it just costs us more money to produce a crop. So that's one item. Um, our labor regulations and things, which are also, as I stated, regulations are an issue, are considerably different than many parts of the country. So our costs there are higher. Our equipment, it costs us probably on average about $10,000 more for one of our trucks that we haul our commodities with or do any of our other work with, because of the emissions and the equipment that operates that, and the fact that we have to spend a lot of money maintaining it. So again, it's the regulations and the costs that we have that we're involved in make it a little more difficult. Nothing we can't overcome, but the margins are a little tighter. We also raise better crops here, yield wise than other parts of the country. So we do have a little bit of an advantage there. Our weather is basically ideal. Sure, we have a drought. We actually grow some better crops during a drought. Your management skills get much sharper. You don't have all the acres planted, but you have to do a better job. The variety of crops is a huge benefit, but also becomes a little more difficult, when you have to go to market. When we're looking at our lemons that are going to be coming into production next year, the markets are volatile, and you do have a wider harvest season for those, so you can kind of pick and choose. But we feel like we have a good relationship with the packer. We actually have somebody already lined up. We're going to be writing. My son-in-law's brother, who happens to run one of the packing houses, has a good source of buyers. And so we're going to be having the opportunity to capitalize on that. So you have to be integrated with other aspects. And in the processing and the, after your production, you still have processing, you still have sales and deliveries that need to be done. Uh, on the water issue, of course, we have SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which if somebody's in Maryland, I know they've probably never heard of that. But, that's a challenge that we're going to be faced with. We look at, river restorations and things like that. Some of the opportunities there we've capitalized on and made some improvements. But at the same time, the timing of certain things are not actually in agricultural's best interest, and so it creates some division, some excitement, on who gets what. So I think on a national policy, California's got some big challenges, but we're well positioned, to meet the needs of the future in production and delivery of food product.
This other parts about changing consumer taste, is that something that, in the production end of it, is that something that farmers talk about? Some of the different, obviously you've been an innovator, but other farmers as well talk about some of these changing things that consumers, obviously the consumers today are not the same consumers that they were 40 years ago, and things change. And how do farmers look at that?
Well, I think a lot of them lose the focus that you have to entertain the buyers who buy for the for the Walmarts of the world, the Costco's. Mm-hmm. I did a presentation up in Issaquah, Washington, to Costco buyers on our operation, and our milk goes to Land O'Lakes here in Tulare, which ends up primarily in butter and powder. We produce 60% of the butter for Land O'Lakes in the West, right there at that Tulare plant. And as long as we gave a presentation. I had video clips, I had pictures, and explained to them how we managed our resources, how we cared for our cows, how we were sustainable. And through that education process, then they carried that on. And they did what they do what they can to educate the consumer, but you have to reach out and really let the consumer know that what we do is sustainable. That's the big key word now that everybody wants to run with. There's some people that want to fall on the sword over organic. That's a choice. I say conventional and organic are the same. We get more production with conventional in most cases. There's a few organic farmers that really have it dialed in, and they have what I would call garden dirt that can really have the opportunity to shine, but that doesn't work everywhere. And if you do conventional properly, it's totally sustainable, it's environmentally friendly, and we need to carry that message. But a lot of people don't have the time, so you have associations that try to do that, but they actually want to hear directly, from the producers, whether you're producing milk or producing a crop. So to change the taste, there's a lot of outreach of, how we do our cows are sustainable. Range beef is sustainable. This coming year, I'm the chair of the California Beef Council, and so I'm going to be tasked with being out there and showing that what we do makes sense, and we want to provide you a good, healthy product, and we want it to be your first choice. And if you don't like it, that's okay. We'll let it be your second choice. Just go ahead and have some.
Tom, last semester when we did a panel on the same topic, Portuguese Americans in Valley Agriculture, one of our guests, Mel Machado from Blue Diamond Growers, was talking about that sometimes folks in the production end, farming, dairying, etc., need to be a little bit more present, such as you've been very present in different associations and incoming president, etc. And so do you think that farmers need a little bit more visibility? Because sometimes farmers take a bad rep for things that they have no responsibility over. And dairy people as well, obviously farmers, dairymen. How do you think the importance is, for example, you with your website where you explain things, where you have pictures, how important is it for farmers to be out there and to be visible and to actually, as you said, pitch their own products?
Well, it's very important because when you can put a face or a personality to a product, and you know that somebody had involvement in that product and they care about a lot of things, you feel better about purchasing that. A lot of people like brand names because they feel they have a connection to that. So it's important. There's no question that many growers take for granted that the market is there no matter what. And if you look at advertising, you'll see a lot of certain advertising, but when you look at their market share, it doesn't amount to anything. However, some will take that as an attack on their well-being. Well, it's just another option for people who actually want that option, and it should be there. You really can't condemn it. If you want to really do the right thing, you just want to say, well, this is why ours is better. And I will go ahead and dive into something like Beyond Meat. Okay, well, they say this Beyond Meat is plant-based. Well, how much processing does it take to actually get it on the shelf? I'm not going to talk about that. To me, that's for somebody to go do the research because that's not our topic here today. But it's that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. What is more sustainable? A rangeland cattle or our cull beef, that has really contributed to a lot of jobs through the processing, the handling, the delivery, and a good healthy product for consumption versus something that's generated in a processing plant. And look at the list. You pick up a steak and it is meat. You pick up with a little bit of fat. We want prime. But you pick up one of the products that wants to be replacement for that steak and look at the long list of the chemicals and the different things that are in there.
Sure.
So we're not doing a good enough job of educating to where people feel good about that product. Happy cows, well, everybody's happy when they're young and bouncing around and healthy and everything else, but at some point, that time comes.
That's true. We have a couple other questions that I'd like to address. Well, first of all, do you use Agrian for your recommendations and use repots? And you know where that one's coming from? Our good friend Richard Machado.
Yeah. Yes. We do business with Nutrien, which is owned by Agrian. I have the same consultant that I've had for the last 8 years, which is only the second one that I've had since I've been farming.
Wow. Because
the first one I had, I'm fiercely loyal as long as they're doing the job, and I make sure they do the job. But there's a lot of good agronomists. There's a lot of good field guys. So my loyalty runs pretty deep.
Yes, that's a good Portuguese trait to have. There was another question here when you talked about regulation and you talked about outreach. There's a question: how can you address that outreach? Do you to Sacramento more presence there? What do we do about that outreach to the capital?
We have a lot of trade associations, whether it be in dairy. I chaired Western United Dairymen for 3 years. We're limited on terms. I was very involved in attending a lot of Sacramento events. The challenge today is it's harder, and in particular, this past year with the COVID, everything's closed. You're trying to get things done in meetings, and it's just harder to sit down and get a representative from Sacramento. And we've had what we call a field day or a visit day or an ag day. And you try to bring the congressional representatives out, whether they're in the assembly, the Senate, whatever, any government official or their staff. We try to make ourselves available where we can get them on site. We have a lot of dairy tours for the Sacramento groups up near Sacramento. We have some great dairymen up there that host a lot of those. And as long as we continue to do that and let them see how the policies that they vote on affect agriculture and the people that are involved in agriculture. You hear a lot about disadvantaged communities. Well, there's a lot of disadvantaged communities in agriculture that have really been punished um, because of the COVID, where there was a lot of job losses, just like the people in town. Um, you know, there's just limits on what you could do. And in our process of handling water for our crops, when we have water running through the canals in our particular area, those canals run right next to the disadvantaged communities and improve their water supply. And we need to share that. We need to make sure that these kinds of things, the benefits of what agriculture does, helps these communities. And besides that, most of the people in those communities work for agriculture, so we're tied at the hip. And as long as we can carry the message, but it's hard uh, to get them sometimes to sit and listen, because it takes money. And when ag has a tough time, it's hard to just throw the kind of money that the big tech likes to throw to make themselves look good.
Sure. Yeah, and they have a lot of money. We do you see farmers and younger farmers? Of course, there's a generation being brought up, as you mentioned, your daughter and your son-in-law. Do you see younger farmers as involved or more involved, and cognizant, aware, of course, of this importance in these associations and these trade associations, and how they can benefit in the long run, the farming operations, whether it be with a contact through the political world in Sacramento or DC, or as you mentioned as well, through different activities that puts, what I call, and forgive me for probably saying it wrong, but a more human face again in farming, because we always associate, farming with people. People are there, it's a lot easier to associate a farm with people than it is, a high tech world. Do you see the younger generation getting involved just about as much as yours, more? How do you see that? Because I know you have contact with various generations.
Well, what really pays off is um, my grandsons are already operating farm equipment and doing a great job of it. Um, and they have friends, and I've always told them, I says, hey, bring your friends out, let them come see what it is. And they're always in awe, these young people, when they can actually come out and take a look and visualize it. It's harder to do a hands-on today than it used to be, because liabilities and concerns and everything else. But when they get an opportunity to be out and look at an operation, and then you show them the technology, you put them in a tractor and you show them the GPS guidance system that'll give you sub-inch accuracy from one end of the field to the other, and explain them how it works, and show them the computers that we use and the laser leveling equipment and all of this technology. And all of a sudden they're thinking, hey, I don't have to do it with a shovel. I can, and I've told people for many years, I said, yeah, I'm a farmer, but my shovel has a seat on it. I don't have to go do that physical stuff. We have things that that are more modern. It's just not backbreaking work if you allow the technology to help you get it done. And they get excited about that. So I know a lot of the younger kids that have come through the farm tours and had the opportunity to see what they can actually do with computer skills. Um, we have a drone program going on at Pleasant View. It's a grammar school. Um, my two of my grandsons are already in high school now, but they participated in that program. And they're still connected, where we're flying a drone and doing infrared over our pistachios to show what the effects are going to be as water comes through and tree health and things like that. So, I mean, and it fires up the entire campus, the kids that are involved in that class. So, yeah, as far as the young people, if you can get them out to see what it is, they get excited about it. They're coming.
In the Portuguese American community, Tom, that you know well, of course, and when we came over in 1968, and lots of immigration that came in those years, as you know, lots of them worked at your operation. When coming over in the 60s and the 70s, from the Azores, dairies were all over. There's less and less dairies throughout the Central Valley. How do you see the dairy industry? I mean, someone told me, and I don't know if that's a fact or not, but I'll ask you that it seems like there are less dairies, but they're probably about the same number of cows. Just operations are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. How do you see the dairy industry? And of course, it seems like there's a lot more. You mentioned pistachios. It seems like there's a lot more trees out there now than in the valley than cows at one time. And I see it even here close to where my home is at. There's a dairy operation went out, and now there are trees there. So how do you see the dairy industry moving forward itself in California, in the Central Valley? And do you see it growing as far as number, or do you see it growing maybe just the operations themselves, those who are in the dairy business, having bigger operations than they once did?
Well, there's no question that the dairies have contracted in number. And primarily, you're correct. It's the smaller ones that have gone out, the 3, 4, 500 cow dairies. But there was also a 10,000 cow dairy that is almost gone. And here again, it falls back into the Sigma water situation. It's in what they call white ground, and it's being planted into trees. It just wasn't an efficient. It wasn't efficient enough where the opportunity came for the owner to sell it. And of course, he had some other dairies that he kept as well. Uh, but that dairy's gone. It didn't get replaced. And most of those cows went out of state. There's some other ones that are closing up because there's no next generation. And the investment money that's coming out um, from these investment groups have basically crippled the opportunity for young people to get started, or even for other people to continue. So when we look at dairy ground, I have a friend over in the Riverdale area where he has some acreage, but he used to buy a lot of feed in a 3 mile radius. Well, now all of that land is in trees, and he's having to go out 10 and 12 miles to get the feed that he needs. And who knows how long that's going to last. So the dairy business is being challenged. I have enough land to grow my feed for my cows, and my daughter and son's cows, son-in-law's cows too. They got their own. Um, but it's going to change. It is going to change. Milk prices are volatile. Um, we have a lot of trade things with the Canada, Mexico, the USMC, uh, with the tariffs that were benefiting us for a period of time. We don't know if they're going to stay. So there's some things that are going to change, and we're going to have to be ready for them to come along and be ready when they come.
Sure. We had at the outset of this, we had told Tom that we would try to keep it to about an hour, and we just have a few more minutes. So if you do have any questions, please put forth. There is one question from a young person, student. It says, as a longtime agribusinessman, if you'd like to address the future of San Joaquin Valley challenges, where do you and we're addressing that, and where do you see the future of young agribusiness students? So those who are now in college, and where is the path of having a life in farming? How do you see that for the young agribusiness students now in college?
Well, the first thing I would say to that is if you're not afraid to work, you'll make it. There are opportunities, um, but you have to put in the sweat. It's not a free ride. Um, there there's a lot of young people that I see, and it's interesting because I don't consider myself to be an older guy yet, but I am. I've come to that realization.
You're still young. You're still young. You're still young.
But I look at these younger people, 25, coming out of college, and they want to just have it all without putting in their time. Well, you have to be humble. Um, Go out and present yourself and says, hey, I want to learn. I've actually got a new employee, um, going on 3 weeks now. He just got out of the Marines after 4 years, and he wanted to get back into ag. He was working in ag as an employee, but our diversification has opened his eyes up to so much more of what it takes, and he's loving it. He says, I love the challenges. I love the different opportunities, and I could see myself doing this the rest of my life. Um, and he's got the ambition that he's not going to be an employee the rest of his life, but he may be in ag the rest of his life because he likes it and he's seeing that there's opportunities to go. Um, he's not afraid to work. He asks honest questions. So um, I think the future is bright for agriculture. Um, as far as the family, I know there's people who would be willing to take somebody under their wing that would have the patience to learn that operation and take it over someday. There's still people out there like that. It's not all about, hey, let's sell it to the highest bidder. Let's sell it to somebody that wants to carry on, this farm's heritage. Um, this farm has been a family farm. We don't want to turn it over to the big tech, the big investor groups, because I've seen them come and go. I remember back in the 80s, big investment groups were just running hard, and then all of a sudden things turned around and there was other places for them to put their money, and they took off running. Our challenge is going to be water. There's a lot of technology being developed in water, so the opportunities are endless.
As we come up on the end, if there's any other questions, please. There is one other one here. How do you connect to such a network? Any ideas of mentoring opportunities that are at Ag Education? Um, I think there are some mentoring opportunities, but I think that colleges also need to have uh, continue to build different partnerships with folks like you who are innovators, because indeed, as you mentioned, it is one thing to do a textbook course, but it is another one to see what's going on. And of course, Fresno State, they have a full operating farm, and that's great. And what do you think that there is? Do you think there's a need for a few more maybe networking ideas between farmers and future farmers? And that takes me to the next question, kind of in the same, which is, I know that you have a scholarship in your honor at UC Davis, and mostly for and it talks and a lot for students who want to go into ag education, so ag teachers. Um, FFA does a good job, but it needs teachers. Do you see that? Do you see that continuing? Because a lot of times when we when we look at education and when we look at cuts, in education, they'll go and cut something in the vocational area, and of course farming and future farmers of American farmers and teachers in that field are considered, of course, vocational teachers. So that's kind of a two-part question from one of the folks in the audience, which is, first of all, is there a network that you know of that has mentors for ag students? And second of all, with your program and your scholarship, how important do you see and what the future of ag as far as having more teachers teach it at a high school level?
Well, as far as a mentorship or things like that, you can reach out to trade associations. Um, Western United Dairyman, Blue Diamond has their groups, but there's a lot of associations or businesses that can connect you with an internship. We had an intern from Cal Poly on the dairy last year, and she really got hands-on experience for 2 months, and she left with a tremendous passion and a lot more knowledge. And during the summertime, even if you want to go out and you say, hey, I've only got 30 days, what can I do? I had an intern 2 years ago from Massachusetts, and the way he ended up out here was Cobleskill, the New York University of Cobleskill had a dairy team out here, and they did a dairy challenge not too far away, and they asked if they could come by and look at our conservation tillage. And one of the young men came back the following winter and worked here all of Christmas break, and did a bunch of planning and everything else. It was great for us and great experience for him, and we still keep in touch. And so just don't be afraid to reach out and try to get an internship somewhere. And in terms of ag teachers, I think they're getting to be a new passion again. There's a whole bunch of young ag teachers out there that I know, and they've got some of their friends that are getting engaged as well. So
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
teachers right on the education side.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, with all your innovation and your diversity, I'm thinking that as you might know, we have right now, because of COVID, it's not happening, but we normally have 4 to 5 students from the University of the Azores that are ag students come over to Fresno State, and sometimes they'll do programs in different areas, and we need to get them out here to the Barcellos farms, because they're going to get a world of experience, and they may even get some Portuguese food from Filomena, right? So
Oh, she can make it.
I know she can. I know she's a good cook. And so yeah, we can get some food for some. They can have matar saudades of the islands by having some Portuguese food from Filomena. And lastly, there is one other question. I know we're running a little bit over, but we'll try to end here real quick, which is, is there much use of solar energy in your farming, or is there much use of solar energy that you see around farms in general here throughout the Central Valley? What's your take on that?
So I have a 1 megawatt solar field.
Okay.
And that provides energy for the dairy, and all of the, so right here, it needs to be contiguous property. So I could use more energy, but the home farm, where my farm shop is at, it's 2 miles down the road and it's not contiguous, so I can't include that. So the energy that I generate takes care of the T-Bar Dairy and all the adjacent properties. White Gold Dairy is too far away, so it doesn't count. But yeah, so that solar field is paying dividends. It does have a lifespan, so we're going to find out. I've been this is 5 years already running on solar. Feeds directly into the main power lines of Southern California Edison, and so then we have some, we have to manage that and try to make sure that we have the right amount of energy allocated to each one of our meters. But yeah, so the energy field, of course, it doesn't generate at night, so we can't do away with everything else. It's it's not 100% answer, but it is something that fits.
All right, and we have a comment. Actually, was there for a little bit now, but which is there's a comment from someone you know by the name of Bridget. I think you know Brigitte, and talking about how important, of course, the field trips are, and how that's basically one of the reasons why she attended, Fresno State, and that the college trips are always taught students a multitude of items, and it's indeed very, very important. I mean, hands-on. We have that in the Azores, believe it or not, Tom. When our students come over from the Azores and do an internship here, or have done, some courses of 3 or 4 weeks, it's usually a very small amount of time. We're working on what we can do in the future. But the biggest thing is they say that they're in Portugal and the Azores, unbelievably, because they have them all around. There's not a lot of hands-on, and so they always they're always taken back by, when they get here at Fresno State. They actually have the experience of touching, the animals, and of being part of what they learn in the textbook. That's very, very, very important. And kudos to you and your family for always allowing whether it be elementary or high school or college students to have that opportunity. Well, Tom, it was fascinating. I learned a lot. You have to come back. We'll have to talk. We'll have to actually do this when we go back in person, because we want you there in person at Fresno State. Thank you so much. Congratulations for your huge success, and above all, congratulations for your family involvement in keeping something in your family for such a long period of time, for all these generations. I love looking at your website. So congrats to whoever had that idea and put it on. I love looking at your. I'm a friend of Bridget's on social media, and so it's wonderful also always to see your grandkids there, getting hands on. And I mean, it seems like you have a lot of labor there.
Well, they deliver the goods.
Yes,
So
I do.
I would actually invite the students from the Azores when they come to Fresno State. I would be happy to host them for a day and show them around, and I will guarantee you that I would put my buffonnage up against anything that they can get at home.
Okay, that's a deal. That's a deal. I thought you were going to put it off on Philomena. No, it's your own befunness. Okay.
No, I cook. I do the buffonnage.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Best of luck again. I appreciate it so much that you took the time to be with us, and for extending it a little bit longer than an hour. Take care, my friends. Best of luck to you. And if I can ever be of service, Fresno State and PBBI, and thanks for your support. You always support all of the things that we do. We appreciate it very, very much. And we miss your dad, obviously, but give your best to your mom. We love her. So thank you so
very
much.
I
Thank you, Tom.
appreciate the opportunity, and I hope I didn't waste anybody's time. Thank you.
You certainly didn't. And thank you all for attending, and stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.